Conditions May Apply by CinnamonPinecones. Read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 109, Intervention. Toshinori sat with Midoriya as the doctor ran through the discharge papers with him. He paid attention dutifully, taking in everything that was said, but in the back of his mind, he couldn't shut down the thought that this was not his job. Don't get him wrong, he was glad to be here for the boy, but at the end of the day, he wasn't his father. This happening once was concerning enough, but twice? Something had to be done. A wellness check or of the house, a conference with his mother, something. He would settle for a phone call at this point. He was lost in his thoughts as he helped the boy up. He insisted on changing on his own, and Toshinori let him. But he didn't leave arm's length once he exited the bathroom all the way until he was loaded into the passenger seat of his truck. The last of the sun's light was making its way past the horizon as he pulled out of the hospital's parking garage, and he couldn't stop glancing over at Midoriya like he would disappear if he let him out of his sight for too long. He wished he could just take him home with him, but again, he wasn't his father. Plus, he could tell he was getting annoyed with his hovering, which made sense if he was used to such a negligent mother. He knew he didn't have the tact to have this conversation, but who else was there? He was the closest to the situation, and the questions were burning his tongue the longer he kept them in. "How often is your mother home, my boy?" he asked as gently as he could. The boy's already stiff posture hardened even further at his question. It, um, it depends on where she's contracted, he replied. Meaning? Well, if she's on contract with the hospital in a reasonable commuting distance, then she'll be home between shifts. But if she's on contract somewhere further away, then the agency pays for a hotel and she stays there, he explained. For how long? Depends on the contract. How long do contracts tend to be? Anywhere from a few weeks to a month, but he trailed off for a moment and picked at his cuticles before continuing. Sometimes they renew the contract. So your mother is gone for months at a time? He clarified as calmly as he could manage. Sometimes, yeah, he confirmed. It took a considerable amount of his strength and several reminders that kidnapping was illegal to not turn the truck around and continue on the path to Midoriya's. How long has she been working on a schedule like this? A few years now? Toshinori's grip on the wheel turned his knuckles white. He did his best to push his anger down and not let it color his tone as he spoke. I want you to text me when she gets home. It's going to be pretty late, he warned. I don't mind, he replied with a tight smile. The truck fell into silence for a time before Toshinori broke it. I want to speak with her tomorrow, he said as they came to a stoplight. He watched as Midoriya fought to keep his expression neutral, but he couldn't cover up the way his face blanched. Well, why? He stuttered out in response. She has been concerningly absent. I just want to make sure she understands the severity of the situation. She seems rather, out of touch, he explained in a much kinder way than he would have liked to. I, I don't think that's a good idea, Midoriya replied nervously. And I don't think it's a good idea to leave a child to raise themselves, he blurted out before he thought better of it. Sorry, I'm sorry. He took a deep breath to calm himself. The silence stretched on, and the light turned green. He had to drive another few blocks before he trusted himself to speak again. The school is reaching out to all of the parents, offering counseling, answering questions, the works. I would like to speak to her personally about a few matters as well. I'm not going to go off on her, I just want to talk. She's left you in the ER twice now, Midoriya. That's a potential case for criminal negligence. This is serious, my boy. The passenger seat had gone silent, and Toshinori glanced over as much as he thought he could get away with. He had his good leg hugged against his chest, and he was hiding his face behind his knee. When they were stopped at another red light, he noticed the boy's breathing was deep and steady in a calculated sort of way, like he was trying to calm himself down. He felt awful, having been the one to make the boy panic so much, but it had to be done. Something had to be done. Izuku could see his life crashing down around him in his mind's eye. He was almost home free. He was so freaking close. Damn it. He was trying to come up with solutions in his panic-addled mind, but nothing was coming forth, and he was a hair width away from opening the door and just tucking and rolling. Not that that would get him very far. Hell, how was he supposed to get out of this? They were going to find out. He needed to hide all of his Ivy gear. No one could find out about that. It would ruin his life completely. Wait, his gear, his identity altering gear. He had a voice modulator and a phone in his mother's name. Kami, this was a crackpot idea, but it's all he could think of. This flimsy ruse wasn't going to last forever, but maybe he could draw it out long enough to figure out a better solution. He was grasping at straws. It was only a matter of time before everything came crumbling down. He was numb as they pulled up to his old apartment building. He didn't remember how he managed to stop All Might from walking him all the way to his old apartment unit, but somehow he did, and now he was just standing in the foyer, alone, and staring off into nothing. He needed to get home. He hobbled away to the nearest bus stop on his crutches and waited. He was too lost in his own thoughts to register how uncomfortable it was that the armrests kept digging into his armpits, or that he kept digging his cast along the pavement. All he could think about was Ivy. UA was digging too much. They were going to find him out, and he couldn't let Ivy go down with him. Finding out he was homeless was one thing, but finding out he was a practicing vigilante was another. That would ruin his career. He would get kicked out of UA. He would never be able to get a license. If he wanted to be a hero, he had to let Ivy go. As exhausted as he was, he didn't even try to sleep when he got back to the brewery. He grabbed his decrepit old laptop and his voice modulator and got to work tweaking the code that the voice modulator used. He pitched it up rather than down and fiddled around with it until the sun was starting to peek through the blinds. It still sounded a touch robotic, but he was hoping that over the phone it wouldn't be too bad. This was an awful idea, but he had no other option. He needed more time to come up with a plausible story to feed Eraser about how Ivy wasn't going to be around anymore. He had joked that he would have to kill Eraser himself to get him off his back, but he was becoming increasingly concerned that that was more true than he would have liked it to be. He was too tired to think right now. He needed to sleep quite desperately, so he grabbed all three of his stupid phones and set their ringers to max volume before passing out on the couch. He was probably going to wake up to a call from All Might, one that he had barely prepared for, but he was too tired to care about that right now. As expected, Izuku was violently jerked away from his nap by his third phone ringing in his ear. He scrambled up and cleared his throat as best he could before grabbing his mask and throwing it on his face, testing it for a brief second to make sure it was on and functional before he answered the call. He fumbled the phone in his shaking hands and dropped it to the ground. Biting back the curses that sprang to his mouth, he grabbed the phone and brought it to his ear. There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment before he heard All Might's voice. "Hello, can you hear me?" "Hi, yes, I can hear you." "Can you hear me?" he asked as he held the phone a solid 2 feet away from his mouth. "Not really. You're a bit muffled," All Might responded. Izuku then proceeded to crumple several things against the microphone before setting the phone on the desk and walking about 6 feet away before asking, "Is this any better?" He had to rush back over to the phone to even hear All Might's response, and he just barely caught the tail end of it. "Actually, much worse." "Worse? Okay, 1 second," he responded, again keeping the phone a full arm's length away from his mouth. He made a few more hopefully heinous sounds by rubbing Velcro against the mic and returning the phone back to about 2 feet away from his mouth. "Is this better?" he asked again. "Yes, that's better," All Might answered shortly, already sounding fed up. "Great, great, great. Time to get berated." As long as he wasn't questioning the slight robotic tone to his voice, then that's all Izuku cared about. "Good, good. What did you say your name was?" "Yagi Toshinori. I'm a representative from UA, calling about the recent attack on our grounds." Interesting. He didn't introduce himself as All Might. That would have been far more intimidating. "Good afternoon, Yagi-san," he greeted kindly. "Afternoon, Midoriya-san. The school is reaching out to the families of all students who had been involved in the attack to let you know we are offering counseling either with our counselors or one of your choosing, as well as to answer any questions you might have." Well, this was surprisingly cordial. He must be following whatever protocol the school provided, at least for now. "Oh, thank you. I'll have to speak with Izuku about that. He's asleep at the moment, but I was wondering, I don't know how much you can tell me, but how did they get into the facility? I thought UA would have better security. How can you be sure this won't happen again?" he asked, doing his best to sound like a concerned parent when, in all honesty, he was just curious about how they planned to combat such a powerful warping quirk in the future. Yes. I can't get into specifics, but they used a combination of quirks to teleport and repress security communications. Half of that combination has been apprehended. Nevertheless, Principal Nedzu himself is looking into our fail-safe protocols as well as doubling the size of our security team here at UA. We have people working around the clock to get these new measures implemented by the start of next week. This campus will be a veritable fortress by the time students are to learn, I can assure you. Izuku could see why All Might was the one making this call. He was a master of deflecting questions and reassuring people without really answering anything because of his history with the media. He honestly wouldn't be surprised if he was the one calling all of the students' parents. "Oh, good. That's good," he replied, feigning a healthy amount of hesitance. "Yes, the students' well-being is our number one priority, which is why I'm calling you." "All right, here it comes. Your son was in the hospital for a full 24 hours before we heard back from you, and we're rightfully concerned about that. Young Midoriya said it was common for you to be absent for long stretches of time. I'm sure you know how dangerous that can be." "Oh, well, yes, I see that now. I'm out a lot for work. I'm a travel nurse." "Yes, I am aware. All Might interrupted. He sounded angry, and Izuku didn't like it. It was subtle, but Izuku knew his usual tone. He knew how warm it was supposed to be, and it had been cold ever since he picked up the phone. But now it was downright frigid. He did his best to remind himself that All Might wasn't talking to him. Not really. But even so, he felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end, the way they did whenever someone yelled at him. This wasn't the first time All Might had elicited this reaction from him, but it was the first time he'd heard him genuinely angry, and he didn't like it. It was stupid, but he didn't want All Might to be disappointed in him. Not in any context. Well, he was going to have to get over that sooner rather than later. Anyways, this wasn't a solution. This was buying time at best. Oh, okay, he answered dumbly, because honestly, he didn't know how to respond to that. I'm going to be frank with you, Midoriya-san. The fact that we couldn't reach you for over 24 hours after your son was hospitalized is a promising start to a criminal negligence case. Your son is only 15. He is a minor. He needs an adult present in his life. And if you can't be that for him, other arrangements will need to be made. I know. I have a friend check in on him. That doesn't help if they're not there when he needs them to be either. All Might cut him off. I understand financial restraints can be tight, but there comes a point when things need to be more important than money. There is no shortage of nursing jobs in Mustafa. I'm aware travel nursing pays handsomely, but it won't pay back time lost with your family. That statement made something in his heart twist painfully. Nothing was going to pay back the time he had spent alone. He didn't have a family, not anymore. He barely even had one to begin with. The closest relationship he had was with Eraser, and he was going to have to give that one up too, or at least give up what it was. He'd still be able to see him every day, but he's not sure if that was better or worse. Being his student was never going to be the same as whatever he was as Ivy. At least he'd still have All Might, probably. He couldn't imagine that All Might would drop him for being homeless. He would probably be mad at him for lying, but he wouldn't. Kami. He hopes he won't leave him. He must have been lost in his own thoughts for too long, because All Might spoke again before he could respond. The school would like to set up a conference with you, Midoriya-san. We aren't starting a case against you, but we will if things continue like this. When is your earliest availability? Oh, freak. Earliest availability? He needed time. Please, Kami, he just needs a little more time. I can't, this contract ends on, the 12th of May, and I doubt it will be renewed after I broke it like this. I can only stay with Izu until he's on his feet again, and then I have to get back as soon as possible. I'll be available to meet in person after the 12th. Izuku squeaked out and hoped to Kami that this excuse would work. He needed time. That's several weeks from now, Midoriya-san, All Might pointed out. Yes, I know. We can't afford to break the contract completely. It doesn't just affect me. It will affect the agency standing as well. I know. I know I need to be home, but I won't be able to get a new job with a reference like that on my record. Just a few more weeks and we'll figure this out. Things will change. They're going to have to. Izuku didn't have to fake the emotion in his voice for that. Things were going to change, and he was terrified. He heard All Might let out an exasperated sigh on the other end of the line before he spoke. All right, May 12th. We'll expect to see you. I'll discuss the time and location with the principal and get back to you with the specifics. Have a nice day, Midoriya-san. He dismissed without any of his usual kindness. Yes, you too, Yagi-san, Izuku replied, and the line went dead before he could hang up. Okay, that worked. All that was left to do now was figure out how to end Ivy's career. He sat on the couch and stared at his gear folded up under the corkboard filled with names and knives. He couldn't stop the tears from coming no matter how hard he tried. Nearly 4 years of his life, he'd been protecting this hellhole for 4 freaking years. This district had been his home for 4 years, and it was slipping through his fingers. He had no clue what the future had in store for him, and he was so freaking scared. All he could do was hold a bundled up ratty blanket to his chest and sob. End of chapter.